The ultimate objective in modern consumer markets is long-term customer retention, specifically cultivating brand apostles who remain committed to the brand over years. In most digital sectors, a consumer can find and switch to an identical substitute with a single swipe. Defection is now entirely frictionless. To measure the likelihood of a customer actually staying and advocating for a brand, the industry relies on the Net Promoter Score, or NPS. The NPS calculation requires segmenting customers based on their likelihood to recommend. To get the final score, you take the percentage of promoters, those scoring 9 or 10, and subtract the percentage of detractors, who score 6 or below. This creates a specific mathematical hurdle. A business can have customers who are technically satisfied, scoring a 7 or an 8, yet these individuals contribute zero value to the Net Promoter Score. Basic satisfaction serves only as a baseline requirement. True retention requires pushing the consumer past the threshold of mere contentment. Mapping the entire post-decision cognitive chain provides a clearer view of why customers defect than looking at isolated metrics. This logic moves from initial expectations through disconfirmation and satisfaction to product value and brand loyalty, eventually outputting the NPS. NPS and brand loyalty sit at the very end. To produce them reliably, we reverse engineer the steps back to the origin. Identifying the specific psychological friction points at every individual node allows a company to deliberately engineer the conditions for a brand apostle. We begin at the transition point where high satisfaction is intended to convert into long-term brand loyalty. Consumer behavior falls into 5 distinct satisfaction zones: defection, indifference, affection, terrorists, and apostles. Terrorists and apostles represent the extremes of word of mouth. Terrorists are intensely dissatisfied and spread negative sentiment, while apostles actively promote the brand. In competitive markets, low switching costs frequently trap companies in the zone of indifference, where customers feel neutral and can switch brands easily. When substitutes are readily available, customers often defect even when they report being satisfied with their current choice. Modern saturated markets force companies to push companies into the zone of affection to prevent them from switching as soon as a cheaper or more convenient alternative appears. Moving back one node, that level of satisfaction is determined by the consumer's perception of product value. Perceived value is a mental synthesis where the customer weighs perceived quality, or gains, against perceived costs, which function as pains. These pains go beyond the purchase price to include the time spent, the effort required to use the product, and the opportunity costs of the choice. Subscription and membership pricing models illustrate how these perceived pains are managed over months or years. As the data from Section 10.3 shows, an annual gym payment eventually loses its psychological salience. As the feeling of having paid fades, the customer's usage of the service typically declines. Monthly payments keep the cost noticeable and the pain fresh, which actually results in more stable and consistent usage. Product value is a malleable perception, driven by how a company structures and times these costs. At the satisfaction node, we must distinguish between a single transaction-specific experience and a customer's cumulative satisfaction over time. Cumulative satisfaction relies on retrospective memory, and the human brain does not record every moment of an experience with equal weight. This retrospective evaluation is instead shaped by a cognitive bias called the peak-end rule. Consumers primarily remember and judge an experience based on its most intense moment and how the interaction finally ended. The actual duration of the experience plays a negligible role. A long experience is not remembered by its average quality, but by its peaks and its finale. To manufacture long-term satisfaction, resources are best spent engineering intense positive peaks and flawless resolutions rather than maintaining a consistent mediocre average. We reach the genesis of the causal chain, the interaction between a customer's expectations and the product's actual performance. The expectancy disconfirmation model defines satisfaction as the gap between perceived quality and expected quality. This leads to 3 results. Positive disconfirmation means performance exceeded expectations. Simple confirmation means it matched them. Negative disconfirmation occurs when the product fails to meet the expected standard. Simple confirmation results in a neutral state, which is insufficient for building loyalty in a competitive market. This creates a strategic tension in the under-promise and over-deliver tactic. set expectations too low, and the product fails to attract the customer in the first place. Satisfaction is a managed discrepancy. Companies must set expectations high enough to be attractive, but low enough to ensure they are mathematically exceeded during use. Interpreting consumer data requires accounting for the flaw of averages. Two brands can share an identical average satisfaction score while having entirely different customer compositions and futures. Brand A shows a tight cluster of neutral customers with no strong complaints, but they are highly likely to defect. Brand B has a polarized distribution. While it has vocal detractors, it has successfully converted a significant portion of its base into extreme apostles. Generating apostles requires intense positive disconfirmation, making the distribution of scores a more vital predictor of success than the mean. Brand loyalty is the systemic result of the entire causal chain, requiring far more than a functional product. Engineering a brand apostle requires the precise management of expectations, the manipulation of perceived value, and the careful anchoring of the customer's memory. NPS is the final output of a process that begins long before the purchase is ever made. Customer satisfaction functions as a managed discrepancy between expectation and memory, a system that can be precisely engineered.